All right. Well, welcome everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Clayton Stenson. I'm the founder of the Unity Guide as well as the Christ-centered Second in Command network. Uh, since some of you don't know me, I want to do a quick introduction. I've been working with visionaries for 15 years. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, working with over a dozen visionaries as an employee, as an integrator, as a coach, or as a counselor. And I'm currently a fractional integrator for construction companies that run on EOS, and I absolutely love what I do. So my goal today is to add value to you. I have a heart for the visionary second in command relationship because my first 7 years working with a visionary were very hard. My brain worked differently from his, and I felt that my perspective was valuable, but there was a real disconnect between the two of us. And since then, I've discovered the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS, and I've seen how incredible a relationship can be and the amazing impact that it can have on an organization. I've also had some challenging engagements that were great learning opportunities. And about 2 years ago, I started doing what I referred to as marriage counseling for the visionary second in command duo. And I've seen some really amazing breakthroughs with my clients. And I hope to share as much of the things that I've learned from all of these experiences as I can today. And I hope and pray that it's helpful to you. So one thing also that I've noticed about a lot of the content around this topic is that it tends to lean either way. It's either written to the visionary or to the second in command. And what I'm going to attempt to do today is to share both sides of the story to the best of my ability. So I'm going to share for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have some space for some question and answers at the end. All right. So today I'm going to do a lot of comparing of the marriage relationship with the visionary second in command relationship because the two actually have a ton of similarities, beginning with their brains work differently. So, how many of you are married? Just raise your hand and please put it in the chat if you agree that your brain works differently from your spouse. So, you don't speak the same language. You can argue about something for 10 minutes and then realize you are actually saying the same thing just in a different way. It can be quite frustrating in both contexts. So that's the first way that there's similarities. The second similarity is that the children follow your lead. So if the marriage relationship is strong, the kids feel it. If it's not, they also feel it. So you're modeling for them what a healthy relationship looks like. And this applies equally in a company. If there's dysfunction at the top, the employees sense it and will mimic it. It's a big responsibility, and you owe it to your kids to do the work to have a healthy relationship and your employees as well. The third similarity is that marriage is hard. I just had my 13-year anniversary recently. I love my wife. We've had our challenges over the years, though. We've had to grow and learn and make each other a priority. And the more kids we have, and right now we have 3 boys, 7 and under, the harder it's been. I think it's the same in a business. You have to value your relationship above all others and make time for it and do the work. And the last similarity is that divorce is messy. If a marriage disintegrates, there will be a lot of bad consequences, financially and relationally. A lot of negative things will happen. And the same is true in a company. If a visionary divorces their second in command or vice versa, there will be some who are loyal to the one leaving, and they may leave as well. So that's not all of the similarities. There will be more that come up as I go through the presentation today, but I need to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk about compatibility. So if you're in a visionary second in command relationship now, or are potentially looking for a new one, there are 5 foundational permission to play or deal breaker requirements for finding unity with your counterpart. The first is values match. I'm not saying that you have to have 100% the same values on everything. That's not possible, but there needs to be more common ground than not. For example, my faith is very central to who I am. I was a pastor for 7 years and I love God. If a potential visionary comes along that hates God or is an atheist, that's going to be a deal breaker for me. And it just won't work. And I can't live a life that doesn't include God in it, nor can I lead a company in a way that doesn't honor God. Now, on the flip side, I'm nearing the end of a fractional engagement with a strong Christian business owner. We had incredible success in our 8 months working together. And I believe that a large key to that was our shared faith and how we invited God into our relationship and the business. So, from my perspective, you simply must have enough common ground in your values for both of you to have peace moving forward. Now, secondly, you must have one operating system. You have to get on the same page about how you're going to run the business. If you have two different approaches, it's going to fail miserably. The team will be confused and frustrated. Now, the entrepreneurial operating system, or EOS, is my current operating system of choice, but there are other systems out there. Some examples are Pinnacle or System and Soul. I don't think it matters that much which one you use, but you better use an agreed upon system. Thirdly, you better have a shared vision. You better do the work to clearly articulate your company's vision and make a plan to get there. And an operating system like EOS and working with an EOS implementer will help you to hash that out. Visionaries have half the puzzle here. They have a vision, but aren't always great at communicating it or making it happen. Whereas the second in command has the other half of the puzzle in that they're great at making the vision a reality. But you better do the work to get super clear on what the vision is and where you're going. Fourthly, you better be open and honest. Are you willing to enter the danger? Are you willing to shoot straight with your counterpart and tell them what they need to hear? Sometimes these things are not what we want to hear, often, I would say, but this is where the growth happens. Often it's those closest to us that see what we do not see but need to. But they need to be brave enough to speak it out. And this is what EOS calls entering the danger. So, are you open and honest with your counterpart, telling them what they need to hear? Sometimes when you hear something that hurts, you need to understand that it's okay to say, "Ooh, that hurt a bit," but I'll need to process that and reflect and understand that it's a gift that they're giving you or that you're giving each other to help each other to grow. And the last permission to play item is humility. Some people don't like the word humility, but I personally love it. Humility is not, in my mind, is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we must be aware of them and learn to delegate our weaknesses and optimize our strengths. This is one of the biggest keys, not just to your visionary second in command relationship, but also to building your team around you. Are you willing to be vulnerable and authentic with your counterpart? Are you willing to go to the hard places? Are you willing to face your fears? Are you willing to admit your weaknesses? You must be humble if you want to have a strong visionary second in command relationship. So these are the foundational building blocks to a great visionary second in command duo. So if you're in a relationship now, do you have them all? If not, you need to have a hard conversation about getting them in place. Do the hard work. If you need help, book a free consultation. I'm happy to help however I can. If it's painfully obvious, though, that you don't have these and it's very unlikely that you'll be able to, then you may seriously want to consider a divorce. In my opinion, life is too short to spend it in a relationship that's not going anywhere. And to be honest, though, I'm not a big fan of divorce, especially in the marriage concept context. But so you do everything in your power to make it work. But if the cost is your peace and joy, it may be time to move on. The Bible says in Romans 12:18, and sorry, I was a pastor, so I'm gonna tie in my faith. Romans 12:18 says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. So you'll notice that it says, if possible. It isn't always. So do what you can, but if you come to realize it isn't going to work, then leave gracefully. Now, on the other side, if you're looking for a new relationship, I'd recommend you slow down and evaluate things carefully before you tie the knot. This applies equally well to marriage, too. I remember someone told me once that when you're single, you should keep your eyes wide open. And once you're married, you should keep them half shut. So this means actively question and test whether this is the right person for you prior to marriage. But once you tie the knot, you need to have grace and overlook the faults of your spouse because we all have faults. Again, this applies equally well in the visionary second in command duo. So once you decide to be in a relationship, I believe there's 4 phases to developing a successful visionary second in command relationship. And the first is called awareness. So when I worked with my first visionary at the church, I wasn't aware that the visionary second in command combination was a thing. Although I did have a sense that it was needed, I remember as I neared the end of my 7 years working there, I had this sense that we needed an executive pastor, someone that could be a buffer between our visionary and the staff, someone who could hold the team accountable, someone who could coach and develop people, someone who could build systems within the team, someone who could create consistency in the way things were done. But I didn't have awareness of how that would work or that it was even a thing. The reality is that each of the 2 people in this relationship have incredible gifts, but also have corresponding weaknesses. It takes 2 of them to build a great relationship. So, for those of you that are new to this whole visionary second in command, I'll give you a little bit of context here. So, the visionary is typically the founder, an ideas person, great at sales, great at managing big relationships and solving big problems. But at the same time, they're usually not great at details. They often have an inability to understand the often relational, unintended consequences of certain decisions. Now, an organization with a visionary and no second in command is often a bit disorganized and chaotic, full of vision and exciting, but often limited by the lack of organization and systems. Now, the second in command, on the other hand, is usually much more logical and process driven. They have an ability to see things unfolding many steps ahead and have a knack for managing people. They like digging into the day to day problems and figuring out systematic ways to solve them for good. Now, that being said, an organization with a second in command and no visionary can become bureaucratic and stagnant. So, second in commands typically are not ideas people and often don't like to lead from the front. Sorry, they prefer to be in the second chair and they just love to make someone else's vision a reality. So when I discovered EOS and these 2 roles, it all made sense to me. I felt that God made me for this second in command role, and I was able to successfully self implement EOS into the construction company that I was a part of. And we 22 times our net profit in 12 months, and I never looked back. But without awareness that that was a thing, I never would have taken action, and that company could still be stuck. So if you don't feel that you're fully aware of these 2 roles, I have an action step for you. And that action step is read the book Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman and a lesser known book called Make the Noise Go Away by Larry Linney. These 2 books will help you become more aware of the potential of these 2 roles. So once we have awareness, the second phase of a successful visionary second in command duo is acceptance. So it's one thing to know about it in theory, but another thing to accept it as truth. There could be resistance from the visionary because they think they can do it all. A lot of times this happens because the visionary is used to doing it all themselves if they founded the company. And when a company's small, it's possible, but as it grows, they'll start having trouble with it. And they'll start to get annoyed by the volume of things that they must do that are outside of their unique ability. As a company grows, it will require a visionary second in command duo and a leadership team. If the visionary is not willing to accept this, it will never happen or will never succeed, and this will keep the company stuck. On the other side, sometimes the second in command can think that the visionary is a flake and that they're the source of a lot of the problems in the company. And this could hold back any possible progress from the success of this duo. The second in command needs to accept that the visionary has a different skill set that's equally important, but very different from theirs. So last week, I started listening to a book called Designing Your Life. And in it, they brought up an interesting idea that they refer to as a gravity problem. And I thought it was interesting how it could apply to this context and this phase, as well as your marriage, if you're married. So in this book, they tell a story. A friend comes to you and says, I've got this big problem and I don't know what to do about it. Oh, wow. What's the problem? It's gravity. Gravity? Yeah, it's making me crazy. I'm feeling heavier and heavier. I can't get my bike up hills easily. It never leaves me. I don't know what to do about it. Can you help me? Now, this example may sound silly, but we hear versions of this sort of gravity problem all the time. Gravity problems are not real problems. Why? Because if it's not actionable, it's not a problem. Let's repeat that. If it's not actionable, it's not a problem. It's a situation, a circumstance, a fact of life. It may be a drag, so to speak, but like gravity, it's not a problem that can be solved. So the key is not to get stuck on something you have effectively no chance of succeeding at. So the only response to a gravity problem is acceptance. This is the you are here or accept phase of the visionary second in command relationship. Acceptance. You have to accept where you are, not where you wish you were, not where you hope you are, not where you think you should be, but right where you are. Let me return to the marriage analogy again. If you're married, you probably can identify with the desire to change your wife or husband. If only they would do this more or this less, then things would be better. Now, my wife and I, we've spent far too much energy trying to change each other over the years rather than just accepting each other. The other day, my wife said to me, "It seems like you want me to be a man." And we were talking about how she's often emotional and I'm always trying to calm her down. After the conversation, I recognized that I was, in fact, wanting her to be less emotional, like a man. And I was trying to get her to be more like me. But that's a gravity problem. The chances of her changing are slim to none. God made her that way and it was not a mistake. So I need to accept that and move on. Now, these same things can happen in a visionary second in command duo. The visionary might say, "I wish my second in command was more visionary." Or the second in command might wish that the visionary was less emotional as well. But neither of these are likely going to change either. So we need to learn to accept the differences and frame them in a positive way. This is foundational to a successful relationship in either context. So, phase three of a successful visionary second in command duo is appreciation. Appreciation is more than just acceptance. Now we must shift our perspective and really learn to love and appreciate the unique abilities of our counterpart. So, let me give you an example. My first EOS visionary was incredible with people in a sales context. Whenever I went somewhere with him and we met a potential client, I was always amazed at how he could make people laugh, and he would always ask very direct questions that I would never even consider asking. We were in construction, and he would ask people what their budget was or what prices they had already, and they would tell him, and it was incredible to watch. On the flip side, though, when he promoted me to second in command, his words were, "Clayton, when I get involved in operations, it goes poorly." His unique ability was sales and networking. My unique ability was management and systems. I still don't think he really understands how I did it, but I know that he really appreciated it when he was able to completely remove himself from ops. And within a year, he had 22 times our net profit. Again, the two people have very different skill sets, and it's incredible to recognize it and really begin to appreciate differences. Then we can move to the next step, which is activation. This is where we now really push to get the two of you operating in your unique ability at least 80% of the time. This is where we elevate and delegate, as EOS would call it. Get as much off of your plate and onto others so that you can focus on the thing that brings the most value to the company. Now, I often work with clients, and this is a spot where we can really see some massive gains, not only in the results that the company achieves, but also with the joy and peace that the two of them experience. When we are working in our sweet spot, it's so much easier to enjoy what we do. So, a quick note here though, no two visionary second in command duos are the same. You aren't always going to fall into the perfect categories that are laid out in the book, Rocket Fuel. My latest marriage counseling clients are actually a bit unique in that the second in command is actually considerably more visionary than what's expected for a second in command. He's more comfortable with chaos than is typical. Therefore, we had to take a different approach with him. The visionary had always had an assistant, but after a few weeks of coaching, I suggested that the second in command get a highly process driven assistant as well that would be able to do some of the detail things that he often doesn't dig into because it isn't his sweet spot. He enjoys managing people, strategy, high level process, but we identified that he really needed someone to be able to keep him organized and do a bit more of the detail process of his job. We also discovered that he had a unique ability in the negotiation side of the business. So we're currently working on shifting responsibilities around so that he can bring more value to the business in that area as well. A lot of this step requires self awareness. If you haven't already, I'd recommend doing a few assessments to get to know what makes you unique and how your brain works, etc. So, another action step, there's an assessment out there that EOS put out called the Crystallizer Assessment. If you Google that, it'll come up. There's Working Genius, Predictive Index, Colby. These are all great places to start. And I would recommend doing that, because if you're not aware of what your sweet spot is, how are you going to make sure that you're doing it more and more? So another way to learn what you really enjoy is to watch your procrastination. Another great book that I would recommend talks about this, and the book is Who Not How. In it, he says that procrastination is wisdom. And if you find yourself procrastinating in something, it may be a sign that you should delegate it if you have the ability to, obviously. Usually, if we're avoiding something, it's because we don't like it or we're not good at it. Okay, so the more time you can spend doing the things you love and are good at, the more value you will add to your business and the more you will enjoy your business. I'd also encourage you to explore what things you should be maybe swap responsibilities for with your counterpart or others on your team in order to make this happen. So I need to shift gears now again into a different topic that I call the visionary continuum. This is something that I came up with about a year ago. So I was working with a visionary and I wasn't enjoying it very much. And I eventually ended up resigning from that role because it wasn't a good fit from a values perspective and in other ways as well that I won't get into. And I started to think about how I would avoid getting myself into a situation like that again. And I wondered, how can I determine whether I want to work with a visionary or not? So I reflected on all the visionaries that I'd worked with, and I came up with 4 types of visionaries on the continuum to help me determine a good fit or not. And the first one is the flaming visionary. So the reality of a visionary is that they are the spark that gets everything going, which is a good thing. But as we know up here in Canada, especially this year, a spark in the wrong context is not a good thing. It can lead to a forest fire, which can cause a lot of problems. And the same can be true for a visionary. If they're a flaming visionary, they've not learned how to control their spark. Sparks are flying everywhere and it can cause a lot of problems. In a flaming visionary, they're typically very aware of their gifts, but not so aware of how their gifts can manifest in a negative way as well. There can be a lot of unintended consequences of the unrestrained or unfocused visionary. They can leave a path of wreckage, frustration, and confusion in their team. And I do not work with flaming visionaries. Now, the second phase of development of the visionary on the continuum, I refer to as the humbled visionary. So, not humble, but humbled with a D, and that D makes a big difference. A humbled visionary is humble due to circumstances that have happened. They're now able to see that he or she can't do it all themselves. They realize now that they need help and that their gifts are great, but not sufficient to get the business to the level that they want. This is a hard phase because it requires a hard look in the mirror, an open and honest assessment of their strengths and weaknesses. It requires that humility that I mentioned earlier. The dangerous part of this phase is that it's easy to revert back to the first phase. It's a habit that's being developed over time, and often it's easier, at least from a pride perspective, to continue on the same path. But it will not work. There is a point where a visionary has to involve other people in leadership roles in order to move the business forward. When a visionary truly believes that, then they can move to the next phase, which is the humble visionary. Humble visionary is ready to move to the next phase of their business. Often, this phase doesn't happen until the pain of staying the same is more than the pain of changing. They're now willing to fully accept the fact that they're not enough and begin to surround themselves with other leaders that can help with the things that they're not great at. A second in command is now a welcomed part of their business, and they see the value of their complementary skills. This doesn't mean that it's easy. There's still plenty of growth required, but They're ready for it and humble enough to embrace it. And the last phase of the continuum is the enlightened visionary. At this phase, they've built a successful business that's not reliant upon them. They could now step into the owner's box and allow the business to run on its own. They're respected and loved by their team because they're able to joke about their weaknesses in a healthy way, and the team can too. This is not a common place to be, but I've seen it a few times. These visionaries often have multiple successful businesses, have learned how to work well together with the second in command and other leadership team members. The first one of these that I worked with referred to himself as a benevolent king, and he truly was. So, if you're a visionary in the room, I challenge you to take a look in the mirror and assess where you're at. Assess where you're at. Be honest with yourself. Are you flaming? Are you humbled? Are you humble and ready to move your business to the next level? We are all on a journey, and there's no shame in being anywhere. But if you truly want success, you need to be honest with yourself. If you're second in command, where would you say your current visionary is at? Labeling them may not be helpful at this point because they can change, but this continuum may give you some awareness to help you. You kind of have to approach it like a gravity problem. You can't change them, but you can pray for them and try your best to build trust and enter the danger to help them become more aware as well. Now, they may not change, and you can't control that. What you can control is looking in your own mirror and working on yourself, which leads me to the second in command continuum. While I was formulating the visionary continuum, I had a realization. As mentioned earlier, when I worked with my first visionary, I felt like a second in command was needed in the organization. And to be honest, nearing the end of my time there, I wondered why I was never promoted to that role. Then I realized that I was a flaming second in command. Yes, second in command's in the room, you're not getting off the hook. So the first phase in this continuum is the flaming second in command. And there is one. I know because I was one. A flaming second in command is so concerned about doing things right, about systems and processes, that they think everyone around them is blind or stupid. Just follow the system. But because they're so passionate about this, often people don't like them. They think they're a stick in the mud or just a plain jerk. The only people that will follow them is other logical, process-minded people. And this can actually create division in the company and have the opposite effect than what is intended. While systems and processes are valuable, no one is going to follow them if they don't like the person presenting them and holding them accountable. So again, the second phase is the humble second in command. And what happens is eventually a second in command that's flaming will get frustrated enough by the lack of engagement and buy-in and will realize that they're a big part of the problem. The approach matters, and the spirit with which you present your ideas matters. Just like the visionary, the second in command now has a choice. Do I look in the mirror? Do I change and take a different approach? Or do I just stay frustrated that the people aren't following? This decision will determine whether they move on to phase 3 and become a humble second in command. I would say that a second in command cannot truly be successful until they become humble and are able to see other people's perspectives and appreciate them all. Just like the visionary, they're capped due to a lack of awareness. I think we all have a tendency to value our own perspective over those of others, but you can't lead well if you stay there. The second in command must learn to what I call finesse it. We have to meet people where they're at and learn to get different types of people to engage in their own way. And this includes the visionary. The visionary is very different from the second in command, and we must learn to see the world through their eyes as well. And the last phase is the enlightened second in command. And when a second in command gets there, they have done so through earning the respect of both the visionary and the rest of the team. They've now built trust with everyone and can now use systems and processes to leverage the skills in the company, solve issues, and set people free to be successful. An enlightened second in command is an incredible skill set that recognizes their role as the people maximizer and strategic leader that can make the vision a reality. And it's truly a beautiful thing. So, if you're a second in command in the room, I challenge you to take a look in the mirror and assess where you're at. Be honest with yourself. Are you flaming? Are you humbled? Are you humble and ready to move your business to the next level? We're all on a journey and there's no shame in being anywhere. But if you truly want success, you need to be honest with yourself. And if you're a visionary in the room or watching this, where would you say your current second in command is at? Labeling them may also not be helpful at this point as they can change, but this continuum may give you some awareness to help you. You kind of have to, again, approach this as a gravity problem. You can't change them, but you can pray for them and try your best to build trust and enter the danger to help them become more aware as well. So now, when we take these two continuums and combine them together, we see that the two are moving towards each other as they progress. If both are flaming, it isn't going to work. If both are humbled, there's an outside chance of success. Ultimately, we need to get to the place where at least one of them is humble and the other is humbled. There has to be awareness, and we have to keep working on ourselves and building trust so that we can help each other grow and progress. So as each one of them grows and evolves, they become closer to each other, more open to the other's gifts, and therefore have more success. So I'm coming to the end of my presentation, and I want to end with a Bible verse that applies greatly to this relationship. The verse is Proverbs 27:17, and it says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." And I don't know if you've ever sharpened a knife, but you use another piece of iron or steel to sharpen it. And when you sharpen a knife in this way, it's all about the angle of the two rubbing against each other. If you get the angle right, the blade can become incredibly sharp. But if you get the angle wrong, you will make it very dull or possibly even chip or damage the blade. And the reason I bring this up is because the same is true in this relationship. The way you approach your differences and the way you approach entering the danger is like the angle sharpening your counterpart. So, do you have the angle right? Are you actually sharpening them or are you damaging them? I believe that the most important thing is that you truly care for each other. You approach feedback to them in a way that you're giving it to them because you care about them and you want to see them grow. If you do this, they can sense it and will be more likely to receive it. If you approach it in an attacking, harsh way, they'll get defensive and the relationship will be damaged. So, my last word to you is to manage the angle well. Apply what you've learned today, and you'll gradually both be sharpened and see great success in your business. So as we shift to Q&A time, I just want to say one last thing. I'm here to help. If you have struggles in your relationship and you need someone to talk to about it, please use the link that I'll put in the chat or for you on YouTube in the comments to book a free time with me. I'll make you a few promises about the time that we share if you do book. One, it will be a safe place to talk with someone who understands. Two, I'll be open and honest with you. I'll tell you what I believe you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Three, my main goal will be to help you solve your problem. And four, I will not pitch you on working with me. In fact, I never pitch people. If you want to work with me, you'll have to bring it up because I won't. All right, so let's move on to the Q&A portion of the call. You can just unmute or raise your hand and I will prompt you to unmute.